Good morning, church. I want to welcome you to our online service, and I want to thank you for taking the time to be here right now, united with everyone else in worship. As we get started today, I want to explain some of the things that you're going to hear and see. I want to explain some of the people that you're going to see. I'm actually going to be sharing some different voices with you this morning. You're going to see some different people in our service today, and there's a reason for that. Over the past year and a little bit during this pandemic, I've spent a lot of time online, like many of you, but I've spent a lot of time searching for encouragement. I've been looking for spiritual encouragement as I've lacked connection with my church family, as I've lacked the opportunity to be in the midst of my church family, being encouraged by them and their faith. And so I've spent time online looking for encouragement, and I've found many different things. One of the few great things about this last year and a little bit has been how many churches have gone online and started putting content online for everyone to hear and to share. And so Chelsea and I have some old churches we used to be a part of, but we've moved around to different jobs and different churches, and we've been able to connect with those churches again in a small way through their online services. But I've also been able to find so much encouragement from some incredible music that's been put out there for people during this pandemic. And I've also been able to be incredibly encouraged by many different pastors and their teaching from the Word. And so I want to share a couple of those things with you, some specific ones that actually just recently have been of great encouragement to me. And so the first is going to be some music. I'm going to have some other people lead us in worship today, to lead you in worship today. One of the things you might not realize about this office that I'm recording in right now is that I actually spend a lot of time in here in prayer and in worship. In fact, I spend most of my personal time in prayer and worship is in this office right now that I'm recording out of. And one of the things that I often find myself doing is listening to and being led in worship by somebody online. I've found so much encouragement throughout my life, taking time to be at rest and to be mindful and thoughtful and to be prayerful as I allow someone who has recorded some incredible music to encourage me, oftentimes even joining them and singing along with them. But recently, you probably know of a group named Shane and Shane, but recently they have released some new songs that they recorded at home for people at home during this pandemic to be able to worship. And these aren't their songs. These are actually just some common, actually quite traditional, older songs of the church that they've recorded in order to lead people in worship. And so they've simply recorded these for people to be able to sing along to and to worship to. And so I was incredibly encouraged by them, and as they led me in worship. And I wanted to do the same this morning for you. I wanted you to be encouraged by these songs as well. And these are older songs, as I've said. And so if you've been going to church for a little while, these are songs you're going to know and that you'll have heard probably many years ago. But if you haven't been attending church for a while and this is all new to you, these might actually be brand new to you. They might be fresh, and that's probably a really good thing. But I wanted to share these specific songs with you because I really do believe they have the ability this morning to not only be of great encouragement to us, but also to lead us in the worship of God, to turn our eyes and our hearts towards Him in praise. And so I invite you to do that now. Let's join together and let's sing with them. Let's praise God together. Before we do that, I'll lead us in prayer, and then they'll lead us. Lord, I'm so grateful this morning for the opportunity that we all have, this opportunity to have so many different talents, gifted people. The church is an incredible thing, and it's been very noticeable during this pandemic, how big it is, how diverse it is. And so, Lord, we thank you this morning for the encouragement we receive from these different voices and these different people. But more than anything, God, we are so grateful that you allow us to be a part of your kingdom, that you have called us together to be your church. And it's because of this that we praise you through Jesus. Amen.
lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praises. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show the way, from the earth to the cross, my debt to pay, from the cross to the grave, from the grave to the sky. Lord, I lift your name on high. Yeah, lift your name. Lift your name on high. Lord, I love to sing your praise. I'm so glad you're in my life. I'm so glad you came to save us. You came from heaven to earth to show your name on high. Lord, I lift your name on high. The name above all names, we lift you high. You are worthy. The secret, in the quiet place, in the stillness, you are there. In the secret, in the quiet hour, I wait only for you. I want to know you more. I want to know you. I want to hear your voice. I want to know want to hear your voice. I want to know you more.
We'll go ahead and dismiss our kids now so they can watch their video lesson. I believe they're on week 2 of the Timothy series. You can find a link to that in the description below. And as the parents are getting their kids set up doing that, I want to introduce you to our guest preacher. As I mentioned, I'm sharing some different voices with you today. I'm sharing some voices that have been an encouragement to me over the last year. And so this morning, I'm going to share with you a sermon by Steve McMillan. Steve is somebody that has been an encouragement to me for a really long time and that I've been connected to for a very long time. In fact, when I first became a follower of Jesus and I first decided even to pursue ministry, his father, Ray McMillan, was the pastor of my church in Regina and was a great inspiration to me in choosing to enter into ministry. And so Steve now is actually here in Calgary, and he's the pastor at Bow Valley Christian Church. And you might recognize that name because Bow Valley Christian Church is one of the churches here in Calgary that helped to plant Northern Hills Church. They are our sister church, one of our supporting churches. And just recently on May 23rd, Steve preached this sermon. I actually just randomly was watching that weekend seeking encouragement for myself. And this is a sermon that as I was listening to it, I'm not typically like this, but in my office here as I watched, I did shout, "Yes," a couple times. I usually say that just inside as I'm listening to Jamie preach. But there were a lot of things here beyond my connection to Steve through his father and through the years following him as a pastor to Yellowknife and then down here to Calgary. Now, besides all of that, what Steve preached on May 23rd really resonated with everything going on right now in my heart and my mind in relation to Northern Hills Church, where we're at, and especially where we're going. And so as you listen this morning, I do believe you'll be greatly encouraged in your faith through it. But I specifically want to ask you as you listen this morning to have the perspective of being a member of Northern Hills Church and being a piece and a part of what Northern Hills Church is. And especially as we look forward, as the last year and a little bit is leading into, hopefully, a great and positive future for our church. I really want to ask you to put yourself into this picture of what he's describing. Know that what Steve shares here in this sermon, it deeply resonates with my heart right now for Northern Hills Church. And I just really felt like this is a message that I wanted to share with all of you. This is an encouragement that I really wanted all of us to receive today. And so let's go ahead. We're going to actually just spend a moment reflecting on the passage Steve is going to preach from, and then he's going to share with us. And I'll also mention right now that as he ends, we're going to actually partake in communion, so you can get your emblems ready before the sermon. And so as it ends, you're ready to partake, and we'll do that together at the end of the sermon. And then after the sermon, we're going to continue in praise and conclude in prayer.
Well, by most appearances, we are nearing the end of what has been a very challenging and exhausting experience in our world. For most of us, the last 14 months have left us weary, with a languishing kind of spirit and a general sense and feeling of heaviness. Medical news and crisis management has created this anxiety in our society that's left us exhausted, and most of us, if you're like me, are just tired of it all. Tired of not being able to see people, tired of the government telling us what we can and can't do, tired of online anything. And while it looks as if the medical care crisis may actually be easing up, I think most of us realize that as a society, we will be dealing with the implications of the last 14 months for years to come. The fallout from 14 months of isolation, mentally and socially and emotionally, is and will be profound and ongoing. And I'm wondering what the impact the last 14 months has had on us spiritually. In one way, it's been kind of purifying spiritually, in a painful but good way. For some of us, we've had to renew our convictions and clarify what we believe. We've sort of had to exercise the muscle of hope like never before. And for some of us, it's revealed to us our need for the body of Christ. And we won't ever take for granted again the gift of meeting together each week. But for others of us, it's been discouraging. It's been dark. And spiritually, it's been difficult. For lots of us, doubt has crept in and sort of taken up residence where it wasn't before. You know, in the beginning, Satan was able to tempt Eve when he isolated her. And ever since then, temptations have been even more powerful when we're isolated and alone. So for a lot of us, temptation has been very difficult to resist these past 14 months, maybe more than ever. Well, I did a little informal survey this past couple of weeks, and I asked people what they thought the spiritual impact of the last 14 months has been, for good and for bad. And here were some of their responses, and see if you resonate with any of these. These are some of the good things. Let's start with some of the spiritual benefits that people said they've experienced. Here they were: greater dependence on God, an increased study of God's Word, more desperate prayer, and more longing to be with God's people. Do any of those ring true for you? Just take a moment and take a look at them and jot down what you think and discuss. Have you experienced any of those? But on the other side of things, there's also been some spiritual difficulties and distractions that have arrived in the last 14 months. And maybe these ring true for you. Giving in to temptation to escape reality more often. Increasing areas of spiritual doubt. Thinking more about me and mine than about others and serving others. Speaking harsher words with a more critical attitude. How about those things? Do any of those apply to you? Which ones? Just take a minute and discuss those with the people around you, or comment online. And the question for us today is, so what now? What is our way forward as a faith community? Do we just try to go back to what was normal before? Is that even possible? Is that what we really want? Is that what we need? I think that now is a time to intentionally reset ourselves as a church, to think carefully about what we want to be and who we want to emerge as from these 14 months of isolation. We're going to gather again, and we will operate ministries once more, but right now we have a chance to do some recalibrating and just ask ourselves these questions. What do we want to emphasize as we move forward? And the answer is that the way forward is the way. And the way has a name, and his name is Jesus. If you were to say, what is it that we're really about? Like what is the center? What is the essential and non-negotiable part of us? There would be one simple and clear answer: Jesus. Jesus' birth, Jesus' life, Jesus' death, and Jesus' resurrection. He's the middle. He's the target. He's the operating center and the operating system of our story. We don't ever graduate past Jesus. There's no advanced level of Christianity that doesn't include him. And I think that one of Satan's clearest and probably his most successful strategies throughout church history has always been to distract the church from being relentlessly focused on Jesus. I think one of the most spiritually dangerous things about the last 14 months is the way that too many of our conversations as Christians have evolved into debates and opinions and that have consumed Jesus' followers, and the discussions have nothing to do with Jesus. And I need to confess that for me, spiritually, this past year, the most damaging thing has been distraction. medical opinions, political perspectives have too often been the primary shaper of what is real to me. And too often I've taken my eyes and my mind off of Jesus. I've been emphasizing my feelings and my opinions and my decisions and my worries, kind of like Peter trying to walk on water. I've spent too much time looking around at the wind and the waves and too little time fixing my eyes on Jesus. But the way forward is to follow the way. And the way has a name. And the name of the way is Jesus. Jesus is our way forward. Well, the reading today, it talks about one time when Jesus came to a place called Caesarea Philippi. It was a place filled with altars to all kinds of pagan gods. And Jesus asked this question, a very powerful question. It says in verse 13, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" This is the most important question that any of us will ever answer in our entire lives. Who is Jesus? And how we answer that question individually and collectively defines our center. Now, Jesus has already answered that question in the Gospel of John with a series of I am statements. In Judaism, I am was understood to be the name for God. And so that means that every time that Jesus makes one of these I am statements, it's a not so subtle claim, I'm God, I am God, the Father and I are one. So let me remind you today who Jesus says that He is. He says this, He said, I am the bread of life. He says this in John chapter 6 when He's with hungry people who are wanting Jesus to provide food for them supernaturally. And Jesus, in fact, has already done it once for the same crowd. He's already fed thousands of them, and now they come back to Him and they want more, and Jesus says to them, I am the bread of life. So if you find yourself today asking that question, who's going to provide for me? Who's going to be there to care for me? Who's going to help me today? Jesus says, I am. I am the bread of life. And then another time in John chapter 8, Jesus says, I am the light of the world. He says, whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. This comes just before Jesus heals a man who was born blind, a man whose whole life had been in darkness. And then Jesus comes, and as the light, He gives light and He gives sight. And so if you're asking, maybe today you find yourself asking, who's going to show me the way? Who's going to light the way forward so I can take the next step and keep moving? And Jesus says, I am. I am the light. And then He says in John chapter 10, verse 9, He says, I am the door. Jesus is explaining that no one can enter the kingdom of heaven on their own merit. You can't just kind of find your way there. You can't earn your way there. He says, I am the door that you go through. So maybe you need to remember who Jesus is today when you get turned around and you've lost your way and you find yourself asking, who's going to get me out of here? Where am I going to go? Jesus says, I am. I am the door. I am the door. And then Jesus in John chapter 10, verse 10, Jesus says, I am the good shepherd. He says, there's a thief that comes to steal and kill and destroy, but I've come that they might have life and that they might have it to the full. And then Jesus follows that with this I am statement. He says, I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So maybe you're asking yourself these days, who's going to protect me? Who's going to watch over me? Who's going to keep me safe? And Jesus says, I am. I am the good shepherd. He also says in John chapter 11, a couple chapters later, He says, I am the resurrection and the life. And Jesus says this right just before raising Lazarus from the dead. Lazarus has been dead. You remember this story? He's been buried for several days, and Jesus and His disciples show up, and it seems that Jesus is too late, but Jesus says, I am the resurrection and I am the life. And then He raises Lazarus from the dead. And so you remember, sometimes maybe you think to yourself, Jesus is too late. It's too late to make a difference now. Too much has passed. Hope is gone. It's dead. It's buried. You might find yourself asking, who's going to fix this? Who could possibly bring life back to your marriage or your family or your heart? And Jesus says, I am. I am the resurrection and the life. And then the one that applies particularly to this series of teachings, John 14, verse 6, Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So if you feel like like the next steps ahead of you, you're not sure what's real, you're not sure what's true, Jesus says, I'm true. I am the way. I am the way out of sin. I am the way out of disappointment. I am the way out of weariness. I am the way forward. I am the truth in a world of lies. I am the life in a world of dying things. And then finally, the last sort of I am statement in John, Jesus says, I am the true vine. You ever feel like your life isn't making a difference? Ever feel like you don't have the power, the energy that you want so that you can impact the world for God? Jesus says, be the branch. He says, I'm the one who will give you the power. I'm the vine. I am the one who will produce fruit in your life and in the lives of others. Where is the source of energy to keep going? Jesus says, I am. I am the true vine. And so Jesus is very, very clear about who he is. But he wants to know, what do other people think? And so in verse 14, the disciples respond and they say, well, a bunch of people think a bunch of things about you, Jesus. It says this, well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say you're Elijah, some say that you're Jeremiah or one of the prophets. And then Jesus asked them this question, but who do you say that I am? And that is the question of our lives. That is the question that determines our future. That is the question that divides humanity. And Simon Peter, one of Jesus' followers, answers and says, I know who you are. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. It's one of the great statements in all the Scriptures. Peter gets it. He realizes who Jesus is. And now watch what happens next. Verse 17, Jesus replied, oh, you're blessed, Simon, son of John. Not because you're brilliant, but because the Father in heaven, my Father in heaven, has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any other human being. And then verse 18, now I say to you that you're Peter, which means rock, and upon this rock I will build my church, and all the gates of hell will not prevail against it. Wow. So Peter gets it. And Jesus says, when you put me at the center, when you know who I am, you become part of a group of people that will never be stopped. The way forward is not dependent on our power. It's dependent on the promise of Jesus to build his church. You could put it this way. Jesus at the center powers our way forward as his followers. Upon this rock I will build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. On this rock. Well, what rock? Well, I think what he means is on the rock of this confession, Peter, on this statement of trust, on this revelation of grace that God has given you to see me for who I really am. On that grace, Peter, on that rock, I'm going to build my church. Do you see the principle? It's on the lives of people who have experienced the grace of the Father to see the reality of Jesus Christ. On that grace, on that rock, he's building his church. And if I understand this correctly, that means you and me. Out of what we have received, out of the grace that God has shown you to see the truth about who Jesus is, out of that confession, based on that grace, it is just assumed that at every opportunity we are going to be agents of grace, and it will spill out of us and pour out to the people around us. And Jesus says, that's how I'm going to build my church. I'm going to take this group of people who have experienced the grace to know me as who I am, and I'm going to put those people down in the middle of a whole nation that needs grace. It's a fantastic plan. Strategically positioning redeemed people in the middle of a nation that needs redemption. And Jesus says he's going to build a church that the gates of hell can't stop. And gates are a defensive weapon. And the idea here is that Jesus is saying that my church, he's saying, my people are going to be militant, they're going to be aggressive, they're going to be advancing. And I'm not going to build a church that sort of hangs behind walls and hides in the corners. I'm going to build a church that tears down walls and grows. I'm going to build it, Jesus says. And he wasn't talking about some perfect church, some ideal church that never existed. When Jesus says he's going to build a church to take on hell, he's talking about the church in Corinth, and the church in Rome, and the church in Ephesus, and the church in Regina, and the church in Yellowknife, and the church in Calgary, with all of our flaws, with all of our warts. You say, you mean God is going to use people, all these stumbling and bumbling people, all of us with our errors in thinking and doctrine and our errors in love? You mean that's who he's going to use? That's the only choice he's got. He doesn't have any other kind of church. He's going to seek and save a lost world through his church, his second incarnation, which is you and me. And maybe you need that reminder today, that Jesus' promise is that he will build his church because he is the I am, because he is who he says he is. His followers who place him at the center will be just fine. We are the people who know who he is. Listen, you cannot shut the true church down because the church is not a building. If you lock the doors, Jesus' followers will just go and meet in the yard. If you chase his followers away, they'll just go meet in the hills or the forests. If you make the gathering illegal, the church will go underground and grow faster than ever. If you persecute the church, it will purify the church, and it will just put the love of God on display through them. If you jail the church, they will just sing praises behind bars. The true church, the Jesus people, will prevail and endure, and the gates of hell can't stop it. Certainly no government restrictions will ever stop it. We are a people, not a building. We gather in all kinds of groups, in all kinds of places, at all kinds of times. And the source of our progress is not dependent on the charisma of our preachers or our leaders or the effectiveness of our strategies. Our future success does not depend on doing the things the way that we've always done them. Our future is not up for debate. Our future is not up for grabs. God has invited us to participate in the greatest, largest, most diverse, and most significant cause in history, His kingdom. And history is His story, and He's building His family for eternity. And nothing matters more, and nothing will last as long. And someday the Great Commission will be the great completion, because Jesus is going to build His church. It's His church, and it cannot be stopped. We put Jesus at the center, and that is our source of power. Well, secondly, if you put Jesus at the center, it's also not just our source of power, it's also our method of operations. It's our method for moving forward. The way forward requires us to put Jesus in the center. And the center means not just theological center or philosophical center, it's also very practical. It means that the way forward is putting Jesus at the center of our methods, the center of our organization. It means organizing ourselves around Jesus. One helpful way to think about this is the difference between a bounded set and a centered set, two types of thinking. A professor by the name of Paul Hebert said that much of the way we approach church and the spiritual life depends upon our deep assumptions about what it means to be a Christian. And he talked about two categories or two sets we use to understand what it means to be a Christian. And the first way of looking at spirituality, the first way of looking at the church and its movement, is what he calls a bounded set. And basically, bounded sets are best pictures of circles. You're either inside them or you're outside of them. And you can tell who's in and you can tell who's out. You can tell if you're in based on a certain behaviors that you do and beliefs that you own. For instance, if you act a certain way or you do certain rituals or you believe certain things or behave with a certain morality, you can cross the line and be on the inside. And once you perform those behaviors, you cross over and you're in. And once you're in, there's this certainty, and it's comforting and it's stabilizing. But it can also be a place of incredible division and arrogance and stagnation. And this way of thinking allows us to see who is in and who is out. And the language for a bounded set is us and them language. And there's this incredible desire, I think, in humans to know where the boundaries are so we can determine where other people stand and where we stand. And I think COVID has made this worse on many levels in our culture. We are constantly deciding who is in and who is out. You're either with me or you're against me. Or as one person said to me, you either agree with me or you don't believe the Bible. But there's another way. And I think this is the way forward. And Hebert called it a centered set, or a centered way of being as an organization. And here, the issue isn't being inside or outside of anything. What matters is our movement towards the center. What is important is our direction. So Jesus is the center that holds the set together. And the people, no matter how close we are to Jesus, the question for the people is, are we moving towards the center or away from it? Are we moving towards Jesus? That is, are we obeying Him? Are we following Him? Are we loving Him? Are we becoming like Him? It's the direction of our lives. It's the orientation of our mind and our actions and our heart. Which way are we headed is what matters. Are we moving towards Jesus or away from Him? And in this model, we realize that God is in a much better position to decide who's in and who's out. In this model, we also realize that everyone has something to learn. We are all on a journey to become more like Jesus. And the closer we get to the center, the more we come near to Jesus, the more like Jesus we become. And everybody has a next step to take towards Jesus. I love this model, and the great gift of this model is that it enables us to disagree on a great many things with others and still be moving together in the same direction. It gives us the freedom to love and accept others rather than feel like we need to judge whether they're in and out. We can now just simply help people no matter where they are in relation to Jesus. We can just simply help them because our goal is the same for everyone we meet. We simply want to help them take their next step towards Jesus, the center. So it's not about hoops to jump through to get in, but rather this idea that we're all on a journey together with Jesus. We're on a way towards Jesus. We're following the way of Jesus to become like Jesus. This is the way that opens the possibility to embrace our common humanity. Somebody wrote that in Australia there's two main ways to keep the cows on the ranch, or keep the cattle on the ranch. One way is to build a fence around the perimeter. The other way is to build a well in the center of the property. And I think Jesus is more like a well than a fence. Jesus is the well of living water. We are calling to each other to come to Jesus, take one step closer, come to the center and drink. So the way forward for us as a church is to lift up Jesus, to keep him at the center, to help every person, no matter what their situation in life, every person just take their next step towards Jesus. The way forward is the way of Jesus, towards Jesus, together. And then lastly, let's remember that this Jesus way forward has a destiny. And this would be the last thing I want to say today, that Jesus at the center is our destiny as we move forward. John, who wrote down all of those I am statements that Jesus spoke, is now an old man, and he's in his 80s, and he's exiled on an island. And God says, John, get up, I got one more job for you. And an angel shows up, and he says, John, I'm going to take you on a trip. I'm going to take you up to the party. I'm going to give you a glimpse of the other side. And I want you to write down what you see and what you hear. You're going to see what's happening in heaven right now. It's like this. It's like a personal Zoom call between God and John. And God says, John, turn up your sound because I want you to hear the song of heaven. And here's how the song of heaven goes. Revelation chapter 5. And they sang a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased men for God from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. Can you see it? Can you hear it? Every tribe, every language, every people, every nation, they're all there. And then I heard the sound, the voice of many angels. Listen to them. Numbering thousands upon thousands, and 10,000 times 10,000, and they circled the throne and the living creatures and the elders, and in a loud voice they sang. This is what they sang. This is the song of heaven. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain to receive power and wealth and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and praise. And then I heard every creature in heaven and on earth and under the earth and on the sea and all that is in them singing to him who sits on the throne and to the Lamb be praise and honor and glory and power forever and ever. Can you hear it? The song of heaven right now is about one name. Jesus Christ, the Lamb that was slain. It's all about one name. They're not singing about the name of a church or the name of a ministry. The song of heaven is about Jesus. And what a moment it will be to be there and to look back and say, my life was great. I got to do so many awesome things, but I'm so glad I leveraged my life for that name. I'm so glad I was part of that church, and I'm so glad we centered upon that name. I'm so glad we leveraged all that we had for Jesus, because that's what the song of heaven is all about. Jesus at the center. That's the source of our power. Jesus at the center. That's our method of operation. And Jesus at the center is our destiny. The way forward is the way. And the way has a name. And his name is Jesus.
the air I breathe. This is the air I breathe. Your holy presence living in me, and I'm desperate for you, and I'm lost without you. This is my daily bread. This is my daily bread. Your very word spoken to me. Oh, and I'm desperate for you. Oh, and I'm lost without you. Oh Lord, and I'm desperate for you. Oh Lord, and I'm lost without you. Yeah, Lord, I wanna yearn for you. I wanna burn with passion over you, and only you. Lord, I wanna yearn for you. I wanna burn with passion over you, and only you. Oh Lord, I wanna yearn for you. I wanna burn with passion over you, and only you. Lord, I wanna yearn for you. I wanna burn with passion over you, and only you. Lord, I wanna yearn over you. Don't Lord, I wanna yearn for you. I wanna burn with passion over you. Don't leave, Lord, I wanna yearn, 'cause you're my daily bread. You are my daily bread. Your living word spoken to me, and